Hi everyone, thanks for joining our webinar today. I look forward to running the session and to facilitate the discussion on how tcard helped Mount Isa Mines to improve transparency and reporting across the operation. I'm joined today by Mark Peterson from Glencore's Mount Isa Mines, who has been a key visionary and a site champion that has really enabled tcard to have these great outcomes. Mark joined Glencore over 20 years ago as an apprentice and has had significant experience in plant maintenance. He spent time in roles such as continuous improvement and has Six Sigma certification. And Mark has worked across operations and maintenance superintendent roles and management roles across the copper concentrator, and most recently as the manager for the copper smelter. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Hi, Glen.
So the structure of this session will be interview style, whereby Mark will take you through some of the problems faced, what else was tried to resolve the issues that they faced, and how tcard came to be and what it has achieved. And we'll also look at how the partnership between Mipac and Mount Isa Mines has contributed to this success. And we'll finish with any questions from the audience. Now, we know with the webinar styles, we are around 30 seconds delayed, so if you do have any questions as they come in, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll get to them towards the end of the session. So let's get started. Mark, I guess if you could cast your mind back a number of years ago now, before tcard, did you want to sort of give a bit of an overview as to some of the original issues faced by the business at that time?
Yeah, so I guess having a maintenance background initially, moving into an operational role, I started to see some really obvious and repetitive failures around a lack of, I guess, discipline and accountability for certain tasks. So, you know, failures that were infinitely preventable just weren't being managed on the back of the rotational nature of continuous shift crews. So I'd seen the structure that an ERP system like Ellipse, SAP, similar could bring. The problem for us was the complexity that brought as well. Turnover in operational workforces is such that investing significantly in training for a complex system probably wasn't practical for us. So I guess some examples. I guess the range of issues we were facing, everything from irregular housekeeping tasks. Infrequent sampling requirements, ad hoc tasks was really poorly managed, just in terms of getting feedback from a night shift as to what had happened on a given task, right through to things like emerging risks where we needed some increased focus on checking certain elements of the business because of a condition that was temporary. So I guess I looked at a number of different options. We tried some pretty simple Excel-based stuff, but it just wasn't dynamic enough to suit the needs of the business. Certainly, when you look at the complications of roster patterns and crews, it was obvious we needed something that was bespoke, I suppose, and tailored to suit our needs.
Yeah, great. And I guess obviously some of those repetitive housekeeping tasks and infrequent sampling that wasn't done. I mean, what does that really mean to your business in terms of efficiency, safety, productivity? What's the impacts of those?
Look, it can range from everything from outright downtime, and significant downtime events potentially, through quality aspects, recovery losses, shortages of raw materials, grinding media and all that sort of inputs. There was a really good example we had at the start, which was around, so we use a xanthate product, Civex, in our flotation, and with the Mount Isa heat, we've got to run that through a continuous chiller circuit basically so it doesn't degrade. It was not infrequent that we'd have an issue with blockages of that system, and as a result, we essentially lose an entire tank of xanthate, and the flow-on effect of rapid mixing, loss of product, and recovery impacts in the interim. That's an example. There was a direct impact purely because the operational team didn't have a good enough system to manage tasks that weren't completed every day. So they're quite good at tasks that were completed every day. The tasks that were done infrequently, so it might have been every week or every month or the start of every day shift block or the last day before a slag run or something like that. Those sort of tasks are the ones they struggle with the most. And so that was an example. That was actually one of the first tcard tasks we put in place was management of that system. And it wasn't long before we realised that we'd effectively eliminate that issue through having that, I guess, first of all, discipline around consistent checks and standardization across crews, but also transparency in when that task wasn't complete and then understanding why.
Yeah, great. And I guess given your context at Mount Isa moving across multiple business units, are you seeing the same sort of issues occurring across the business?
Yeah, I don't think the problems are unique, and certainly across, there's 4 metallurgical plants across the Mount Isa Mines lease. We've got a lead smelter, copper smelter, copper concentrator, lead zinc concentrator, and I don't think that there's too much difference in terms of the problems that they face of this sort. Operational crews are increasingly becoming stretched in terms of footprint and requirements, and that's a need for the business. But in doing that, you need to make sure you've got the organisational capability to make sure those resources are properly utilised. So since moving to the smelter, we've got tcard up and running here, and it's delivered similar benefits, I guess, for this operation as what we saw at the copper concentrator.
Yeah, great. And you touched on earlier that how you were using Excel to manage some of those tasks in that part of the business at the time, and just wondering if there's anything else the organisation had sort of tried to put in place to resolve those issues. Was it mainly the Excel tools, or?
We had tried Ellipse, so we tried our ERP software. That was labour intensive to say the least, because of things like work order closures. There was a planning resource that had to sit above it, so we had to employ a full-time planning resource for operations to manage creation, scheduling, printing of the work orders, closure, follow-up, all those sorts of things. And in that, again, the reporting metrics from that system was typically a week in lag. So that didn't really work for an operational team for the reasons we talked about before. Simplicity and transparency is probably the 2 key things that tcard presents, I guess, for us. But the administrative workload behind those systems, it would be the Excel system really simple or something more complex like SAP or Ellipse. It just wasn't practical for us, given it's a 24-hour operation. And given again that we're constantly looking to optimize and improve our efficiencies, it was impractical for us long term to dedicate the resources required to administer that sort of system.
Yeah, okay. And I know we spoke before about some of those systems. Some of the reasons they were ineffective were around their lack of automatic recurrence. Within the systems.
Yeah, for sure. I guess just the ability to set it up, by crew, because one of the big problems we had in terms of that recurrence was the load share probably wasn't where we wanted it to be. So I'd regularly hear comments like A crew is the only crew that does the cyclone maintenance, and B crew is the only area that cleans up wet fill, and C crew is the only, and so what I found was everyone was kind of doing their bit. They were typically doing their bits inconsistently and in different ways. So everyone had a different approach. It wasn't necessarily the best approach. And so I guess the recurrence, because tcard maps so well to the rosters, the ability to be able to say that I want on the second shift of A crews every first day shift block to be able to have this and this task completed. What that means is that we get a much better spread, much better consistency and standardization of how those tasks are executed. So unfortunately, and SAP and Ellipse just don't seem to go down that granularity of roster codes and teams and that sort of thing, and certainly not to the point where you can split it by area, because that's the other thing. We didn't want to make this thing a complex beast. So the fact that tcard can be segregated into areas, grinding, flotation as an example, our tailings facility, we can break it into whatever elements we want just to keep it very clean and simple for the end user.
Yeah, definitely. Like keeping it simple is always a good thing. And I think you kind of touched on, why you didn't use your existing Ellipse system. Obviously, very complicated, not something that you would want operators working on a day-to-day basis. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, one of the big things we really wanted to achieve was to have this in the field, and from the very start, I guess the ability for tcard to be mobile is something that we're very keen on. But beyond that, beyond tablets and whatnot, just having them in the field and making it very quick operation. You know, we don't want people having to log in through multiple screens and having to understand. You know, anyone who uses a smartphone effectively can use this software. So we really wanted to keep that fairly dynamic. The other thing for us is, you know, our crew makeup can change pretty rapidly. You know, we might have someone sick, and we've got to get someone to come and cover. We might have that part of the plant shut down for the day, so we've got to move someone across. So the ability for it to match those requirements are pretty important as well. And I don't think you know, off-the-shelf solutions would have met that requirement. We tried, but it just wasn't successful.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess if we again cast our minds back to when MIM and Mipac was first discussing the idea of tcard, what were some of the goals that you were trying to achieve in addition to obviously solving those problems?
As I mentioned before, spreading the load is really important, so we get the right balance across the crews. We put a lot of money into the development of standard work instructions, so we put a lot of time and resource into developing these really good documents that, unfortunately, historically before tcard typically sat on the shelf. So they were in, you know, a document management system online, but they weren't something that was utilised at the coalface. So when the job was actually being done, what we find is that the money that we invested in the SWI wasn't typically being used because it wasn't at hand. So the ability to be able to hyperlink those documents, photos, videos, all that sort of guidance into that meant that not only was the standardization better because everyone was doing it the right way, but also the speed of execution and the safety associated was improved as well.
Yeah, I remember when I was an apprentice in the UK, and as an instrument technician, I remember going to the office and seeing the old SWI effectively folders sitting there and how outdated and everything they were. And as soon as I had actually printed that out and taken it to the instrument to do the task, realised, you know, they're almost worthless unless you can actually have them when you're doing the job. So you know what you're supposed to do, and feedback that loop as well to management of when they're starting to creep out of currency.
I agree, and that's one of the big things we really try and impress upon the crews, that this is their system, right? So if there's something that's not right within it, if you know, if like you said, the documentation isn't relevant to the task, if the task repetition is too frequent, if we're not addressing the right things, we want to keep it a very dynamic thing. And so I guess the ability to change that stuff in the background quite quickly has been a big plus as well. The other problem, I guess, with a lot of the off-the-shelf solutions that you can find, and they are typically fairly simplistic, but they're not mapped, as I said before, to the continuous shift rosters. So, I mean, the good thing about tcard, as an example, is, you know, come sea crew start a shift at 6 o'clock when they start, their shifts will automatically cycle to the top. The previous shifts will still be in the background, but it's very clear what crew is on and what tasks have been assigned, and then you can link that back in terms of the reporting to understand what tasks have not been completed and why. So I guess that whole integration into our, you know, making it customizable enough to fit us rather than having to fit around existing software was probably the main thing.
Yeah, great. And I know one other thing that you sort of mentioned was around to try and give operators a sense of purpose and recognition for good performance.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of healthy competition, I guess. It was a good thing from the start. There's some really good reporting that the crews can see, and I think for the most part, you know, the completion rate's typically in the high 90s. So yeah, that's better than the average maintenance team, I think. But certainly just being able to recognise the operators, because I think the days of you know, manual checklists that maybe make their way to a supervisor and sit on a desk for a while, they're probably gone. Having this, it's integrated in our production meeting, so every morning we'll review the tcard comments and the completion rates from the previous 24. If there's areas that we need to address, so there's issues that's being raised or there's really good solutions that's being found, we try really hard to recognise and reward that contribution. So that's been really good. The transparency that it's brought. You know, on the weekend I can have a look on my phone and see what's happening in the plant effectively from frontline operators' feedback. So that's been good.
Yeah, great. And it must be great for the operators to know that they've got supervisors and management regularly looking at those comments and actually giving them that feedback loop of addressing some of the things they pick up.
Yeah, it's really made it. It does. It's closed that loop because you know, I'm seeing information. The superintendents are seeing information. They're getting on the front foot with issues that are developing. You know, it might be a comment here, comment there around water pressure as an example, and it's, you know, you can see it's frustrating the crew. So, you know, we'll take the front foot and get out there and sort out the issue before it becomes something that creates an injury or a morale impact.
Yeah. Okay. Next question was around how tcard helped you really achieve a lot of these goals. Like, was there, you know, we've talked about how the operator comments and things that are sent through to supervisors, or any other features of the tcard product that's really helped you achieve those goals?
Just in terms of, well, I mean, the shutdown functionality as an example has been a really good one. So we didn't utilize operational resources very well on shutdowns. You know, we'd get them doing some cleaning and stuff, but it wasn't typically very well organized. And so I guess one function within tcard that we found particularly useful is the equipment hierarchy in the background. So you can selectively turn on and turn off equipment. So if you know you've got a 48-hour shutdown, for example, on a mill, so it will automatically turn off the tasks that are online tasks. So an example would be taking cyclone densities, which is a fairly regular task in a flotation plant. You take cyclone density when the mill is running, but when the mill's offline, obviously you can't do that. So then once that equipment hierarchy is turned off, it will produce a number of shutdown tasks. So it might be cleaning out the launders, exercising the knife gates, you know, restocking X, Y, Z. So I think that has made the utilisation of operational teams significantly better. As an example, I guess there's lots of others, but yeah, the shutdown task management stuff, and once that stuff's built in, you know, I mean, typically it's easy to change, but typically once you start to build that list of this is what we'd like to see during a shutdown event, that becomes pretty useful.
Yeah, okay. And you also mentioned before how, you know, embedding those links to the SWIs has brought that information to them as they're doing the work. Have you found that has standardized the approach that's been taken as well? Has that had any gains there?
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, there's always a smarter way of doing something, and I think you know, the photos and the videos, as an example, beyond the documents. I mean, anyone can write a long worded document, but a photo or a video has really been beneficial. But I think equally important is keeping that open mind about, you know, if the team does find a smarter way to do something, well, let's make sure we capture that and get that updated in the system, and then all crews can start to manage that in a similar fashion, rather than having these pockets of excellence and others that are probably less so.
Yeah, definitely. And I know at one point in time there was something around like the 4,000 tasks being completed a month. So it sort of shows how much it's being used throughout the various crews. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, you know, it is quite good, because if you consider your operational workforce, I mean, they're typically significant. It's normally the largest part of the operation, and it's the resource that potentially isn't the best utilised at times because of a lack of organisation, a lack of clarity on what the deliverables are.
Right. And one other question, we've talked about some of the outcomes that you had hoped for. Were there any other unexpected outcomes that you've seen from the rollout of this tool?
I think I might have touched on it earlier, but probably just that morale. I think that you know, familiarity with problems. I go out in the field now and I can talk to the operator about the task that he commented on last week. You know, I can understand the challenge that he's faced. I can understand the improvement that he wants to make, and I think just having that, it's effectively one-on-one communication. You know, I'm talking directly, not through a supervisor or through a superintendent, but understanding directly what that frontline operator needs and wants is really good for us. I think the morale impacts have been significant.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. And the rollout, obviously we've gone through a number of rollouts to different areas at the moment. Are there any things that stand out to you as why they've been successful through the deployment stages?
I think taking a measured approach to it. So 4,000 tasks is significant, right? But they need to be well thought out, well understood tasks introduced to a mature workforce to understand what it's about, right? So I think the success for us was very, I wouldn't say slow, but incremental introduction to the process. So start off with 2 or 3 tasks that you're really not doing that well, standardize those, get familiarity, get comfort, get trust in the system, because that's one of the big things. We have not used this system as a whip. We've used it as a communication tool and a standardization tool, but it's not a tool to hold people accountable with. It's a tool to have conversations with and improve the business as a group. I think the deployment services that Mipac offers has been really good. So, I talked before about resources, and no one's resource rich typically. So there is a little bit of upfront work, obviously, in coming up with the key tasks that we want to achieve, and obviously a little bit of upskill on how the system works, a little bit of integration work, and there's a little bit of development in getting those tasks loaded with the right detail. But it's kind of an evolutionary thing. So start off very small. But with I guess with the Mipac assistance, we were able to get that done, relatively quickly to get things up to speed, because particularly the copper smelter, we probably didn't have the time. We wanted to get this happening fairly quickly. I didn't want it to become a 6-month process. I wanted to see this happening in a relatively short period of time. So I think the assistance that you guys provided to get this up and running was definitely value add.
Yeah, and we've definitely learned through that process as well, around the started small. It's very tempting to try and get all of the tasks that you want done and import them all, and but that's going to fall flat on its face because it's quite overwhelming. So like you say, just build the cadence and start small. Although there have been other areas of the business and other clients that have relatively good processes at the moment and cadence of tasks, albeit on a different system. And so some of those we found are a little bit more easier to onboard in terms of the number of tasks that they do. So
yeah, it probably depends largely on the maturity of the team and how used they are to completing those tasks. But I guess if you've got an existing system that is largely working in terms of task execution, what this can really bring is that transparency and visibility around what's happening. That's probably been one of the big ones for us.
Yeah. Okay, and I might just build on that a little bit. You kind of touched on working with Mipac, but how did you find working with Mipac during this process?
Yeah, really good. Obviously, knowledge of the industry is a big thing. If we tried to do this with a traditional IT software development team, it would have been difficult to say the least. Just understanding the dynamics of a mining or processing site, I think it's pretty important to have that upfront knowledge. But then couple that with the understanding how people think and what works. Simple things like some of the formatting tools and spell checks and stuff like that are in the system. Has been really good in terms of task creation. Being able to integrate well with our IT teams being strong. So there's been a couple of different views around cloud-based or on-premises solutions, and I guess Mipac's integrated really well with that. So that's been positive. IT support team shouldn't be a barrier, but they've got to hold their standards, and I think Mipac's integrated really well with them as well.
Good to hear, and we hope that the ongoing support also has been working for you. The outages are minimal, if not none at all, and
yeah, definitely. And I think we've gone from Ellipse to SAP, and that has been an interesting affair to say the least. But I guess the one continuous thing has been tcard. From an operations perspective, that they as I said, the take up is quite quick, because if you can use a smartphone, you can use a system. But because it's effectively a system that we've deployed, we can maintain that consistency. irrespective of what's going on in the ERP space.
Yeah. Okay. I guess if anyone online does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, but I'll probably open with my own, which is a very broad question, but would you recommend tcard to other operations? And if so, why?
Yeah, just knowing, I absolutely would. And just knowing what it can do for an organization. I think, as I said before, there probably aren't too many operations around the place that are dissimilar to Man Eyes and Minds. We've all typically struggle with the same sort of problems around turnover and consistency, and not allowing things to continue to happen in the same fashion, but intervening and doing something long term and sustainable to correct it. That's been a big one for us. This system's never going to stay static. It's a dynamic system, and it needs to be continuously monitored and updated. Not that that's a workload impact, but certainly just to remain relevant. What we do find is that once something's done well and embedded, we'll typically decrease the frequency. So just to make sure there's still a health check on it getting done, but it's not in your face every second day. So yeah, look, I think for a number of reasons, as we've already mentioned, I think it's an excellent option for any team that's looking to standardise and improve their operational discipline.
Thanks. One other question I have around safety. I know that housekeeping around operational plants is critical to making sure that a safe work environment exists. And not only that, the morale of employees working in an operation that's clean, tidy, etc., is important. Have you seen any turns in the tide on that front?
Yeah, it's fairly integrated. You got to have an overall housekeeping strategy, right? And I think the operations team obviously contributes a significant amount to that, and it's in two ways, I guess. There's the front line. We need to keep the place clean, so we need to do regular hosing. We need to, but it's other things like level control issues that have gone away because the guys typically give it a bit of a clean, so the pump box won't overflow. Doing that sort of stuff regularly. It's not really a maintenance task because of the frequency it happens, but it's something that wasn't happening previously. So if you can address some of the root causes, then the need to do the constant hose ups and cleaning and that sort of stuff tends to drop off a little bit. It never goes away, but it can certainly improve significantly. So just targeting that root cause, understanding what contributes to some of the housekeeping challenges we've had, and then, as I said, standardising that across crews has been really powerful.
Yeah, great to hear. Look, Mark, there's no other questions that have come in. One has just popped up. So the question is, what's next for tcard at MIM and beyond MIM? So yeah, I guess we've had some conversations before around where you would like to see tcard go. Did you want to share any of those ideas?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, Mipac's capability with some of our process control systems is quite handy and probably so far unleveraged. But something I'd like to do in the future is to tie some of that stuff together. So rather than go and check a filter or a strainer because we know that it blocks every approximately 6 weeks, if we've got a differential pressure sensor on it, well, it should be triggered by that sensor. So condition-based inspections and works rather than time-based, I guess, would be the next step for me. Beyond that, I suppose, the copper smelter is largely still based on fixed units, so fixed terminals within the plant. I want to get a lot more. I want to get a lot more digital, a lot more mobile, I suppose. So tablet, tap books and tablets, that sort of stuff, to make it a little bit more mobile. And then I think the feedback from operators, and this is something you guys are already working on, is the ability to upload photos, make that process as seamless as possible, so that when there is a comment about an issue that they've identified, that they can actually really quickly link that through their tablet, hit a button, upload a photo to their task comments.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, that's a priority for us at the moment to get that functionality there, so that you can get that visual feedback as well of what the issue is, which I think is very important. And the integration between systems is, again, something that we see as key to the ongoing success of that product, so that it can integrate with various other systems, including our own MPA product that can then automatically, schedule tasks, like you say, on conditions, etc. So, right, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So, Mark, I might close there, but before we do, I just really want to say thank you from myself and the team at Mipac for giving us some really great insights into the challenges faced by the business and the industry as a whole, and how you've been able to solve them. And we look forward to continuing the relationship beyond this and seeing how we can further add value to Glencore's operations through tcard and other initiatives. But thanks again, and thanks to all those who joined online. We hope that you've got some value out of this session, and feel free to shoot any questions through to myself, which is glen.johnson@mipac.com.au, or alternatively through the sales channel of sales@mipac.com.au. But thanks again, Mark, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Glen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.